Hi, this is Jessica DeMassa with the Guidewell Insights Lounge. We are here live at Exponential Medicine. The main stage session has just gone to lunch, and I'm rejoined by Dr. Nick, the Chief Medical Officer from Dell. And now we have a new guest who will be conducting a co-hosted interview with me. We have Zayna Khayat, and Zayna is the Senior Advisor for Health System Innovation at the Mars Discovery District. So welcome, and welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So Zayna, I want to start with you because you're new on set here and you're going to be helping conduct this interview. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what's your focus over at the Mars Discovery District?
So Mars is an innovation hub in Toronto, and it's kind of like a singularity. It stands for medical and related sciences, so really a chance to put Canada on the global map in the new health economy through innovation at the convergent points of all the different disciplines. So we work with about 300 health startups, and I lead a team that works on getting tech adopted at scale into health systems.
Okay, so that's going to be the focus of our conversation right now, and we're going to wrap Dr. Nick in. So we were chatting a little bit before we started. So let's start out there. Let's ask your question about adopting innovation at scale.
Yeah, so Dr. Nick, you heard over and over again in every session, the reason we all have jobs and wake up every day is to impact patients. And the only way that's going to happen with all this incredible tech is if it's impacting patients at a cost or a scale that's acceptable to either society or to the public sector or whoever. And so being with a major corporation with a very big ambition in health, what have you seen in terms of the ability to close that gap between great tech that works, that could have impact, and actually capturing that impact at scale?
So, great question. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit conflicted to answer this correctly because essentially we might all be out of a job, right?
There's no wrong answer here at the Guidewell Insights Lounge.
Because ultimately, if you can do that, we're going to achieve that, what I would call nirvana. You're essentially taking all of this technology and implementing it to essentially remove all of the barriers. And of course, that's the major challenge.
Yep.
We see lots of innovation. We see it here, we see it at other conferences. So for me, one of the things that sort of captures that as a sort of challenge is my own personal experience. So I'm currently going through my genome sequencing. I went through 23andMe. I managed to beat the FDA to the punch, fortunately. Got the 300 insights that have now sort of diminished a little bit. But now I'm going through the full genome. So that was a partial, that was an exome analysis, and now I've had the full genome. So I've had the sample. It had to go through my physician because of the regulations that exist. And Illumina, digital company, all digital machines, we've seen a number of them, the sequencing costs, all of that stuff, great. And I'm going to the conference to sort of explore that. We've got some, really exciting, and I'm doing this in part to sort of learn and understand, because ultimately, if you think about some of what's happening with this data, it's going to be critical. I think at some point in the future, we'll sequence everybody. And I know that's terrifying to some people and put that to one side. But if I told you today, as Craig Venter says, if I took your sequence at birth and gave you the advice and you followed it, I could extend your life by 8 years, categorically, with the information we know today.
Yep.
And we're on this exponential curve. So they sequence me and they produce all of this data. What do they do with it? They print it out and mail it to my physician.
Why didn't they fax it?
They could have faxed it. That might have been a little bit faster, but I think lower resolution. And my physician receives it, scans that into his electronic medical record. I go to get my copy from him, and he hits print from the medical record to produce. So that, for me, that one story encapsulates everything about the barrier. So how do we break that down? So this is about the what I understand, and I'm obviously don't hail from these shores, the railroads, where, I want to say that they met and, there was a mismatch in terms of the sizing and the gauge, and, so some of this it's standards. It's issuing or creating an environment that essentially allows and removes that friction that exists. So some of it is creating, I think, standards that will allow us or demand sharing. And maybe it's not just standards, maybe it's empowering the patient to say, it's your data. Because ultimately, if I gave it to you and you control it, now you've got much more control and much more incentive. as I keep saying, every time I walk into a physician's office, and I had the privilege of delivering all 3 of my kids, I was just there really, but I took that role. And when there was pushback, I had to explain, in this room, who has the biggest vested interest in the successful outcome of this after my wife? Because she obviously had the...
Sure.
Well, it was me,
Yeah.
clearly.
Right.
And that's the same with everybody. I'm not different, I'm not unusual. So I think removing this barrier that says it's my data, it's the patient's data, and empowering them. Now, there's a host of issues around explanations and challenges. So how do we enable them with enough information? I think we're starting to understand that. And then, the regulations that essentially support that. So we've seen a little bit of that from HHS. They've sort of empowered the patient. I think we're seeing it with some of the noise coming from CMS and the government that says, no, this is the way that, and I think we see it from some of the countries.
Sure.
What goes on in Canada?
Yeah.
How are you dealing with that there?
Yep. Finding the policy barriers that could unlock massive opening.
Right.
I think we're seeing one by one they're getting torn down. Kind of like what the Uber did to the taxi regulations in many jurisdictions.
I'm curious to know, I mean...
So I want to pick up on that because to me this was one of the most, I thought, insightful quotes that I've heard in the last 24 hours or so.
That's saying something at this conference.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
was. Be the Uber and don't get Kodak.
Don't get Kodak.
Ah, very
that one
nice.
got
That's a good
retweeted,
one.
right?
Good nail.
It
Yeah.
really did, right?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. I think that's well said. What I was going to ask is, we obviously have you from Dell, which is an enormous multinational corporation, and then we have Zayna, who's representing. She helps startup companies take their innovations to market.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, in healthcare, are you facing the same set of challenges, or are these different? So, I mean, what would you say is your biggest challenge with these startups trying to get their innovations to market? Is it scalability?
Yeah.
What is it?
So I'll recap what Nick, I think I heard said, is going to smooth the path. Standards are taking friction out of the process, kind of rethinking the role of the patient and the balance of power, and then maybe you don't even need the friction in the first place.
Right.
And then, getting the playing field leveled through some regulatory shifts that are really undermining, right? So I think those are the exact same barriers for an emerging startup. I think the difference is, there's kind of 2 paths for the startup. Go it alone and bulldoze your way through because you have a vision and such a great technology that can really be your Trojan horse through. There's not that many like that.
Right.
Either the founder doesn't know how to navigate that, they don't have the capital to navigate that, or the tech is just not at that performance level. So that's going to be, in my opinion, the rare. The bulk are going to be connected to the vectors of scale, the Dells, the Apples, the Becton Dickinsons, the Pfizers.
Right.
And then we're going to piggyback on their ability because they've got all of the, I think, resources to bat down all those barriers a lot more formidably than I think we can. So it's a really symbiotic kind of relationship.
Excellent.
That's how I see it.
From your perspective.
I don't disagree, but there's a part of me that says that, if you continue to innovate with the same traditional groups, you miss that big jump, the big leap. Using old thinking, you create, the same challenges within that. And it's not that we have the old thinking, but I think I see our sort of role in this as the enabler.
Yeah.
So we want to be the supporting act to those, because
Sure.
without those small innovation, and that's the beauty of the internet and this sort of methodology of exponential, just takes one person.
Right.
We're seeing cellular research occurring in the same way that we saw Apple innovate and create a PC in a garage.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
garage. I'm sorry, am
No,
I
you're
saying
good.
that wrong?
No.
So think about that for a second. What used to happen in these storied universities is now happening in somebody's basement. They can order in the same way that you go to Amazon and you order things. They're ordering the cell lines, they're ordering the test kits, all of that.
Yep.
And they've got access to an awful lot of this data. So now suddenly again, this democratization of access.
Yep.
Knowledge is power. We've always
Right.
known and I think understood that. So from a Dell perspective, I think our view of this is that we have to engender an environment that allows those small innovators to achieve success and be successful without huge cost and huge barriers.
Yep.
And for us, that's removing the barriers of data, allowing for the flow of information, and doing it at a price point that allows these people to jump
accessible.
in. So, you know, when your kid comes to you and says, my science project is to develop a cell line for cancer for the BRCA gene, you go,
Okay.
sure.
Let's do that.
Right? You know?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
we've seen that with some of the instances of innovation. So I think it's the combination.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think
Excellent.
our enablement is the flow of data. Data should be free-flowing and accessible, but importantly tied together. And there's a lot of discussion about structured, unstructured. I don't think we'll ever resolve that. I think it's always going to be a mix. The beauty of NLP and the capacity to understand things now allows us to take unstructured data and do useful things. We saw that with John Mattison and Kaiser. They're already implementing some of that. We'll see that across the board. And NLP is available as a tool that you can access. So all of these tools. So if I was to pick a technology or something that's a real sort of spark, I'd pick the sort of principle. I don't know that it's the Lego, but the Lego robotics system that essentially allows your kids to start to think differently.
Yeah.
This rote learning concept is preposterous. You need some basic skills, but you need critical thinking and the capacity to apply that knowledge in ways that you go, wow. The best ideas are always the ones that other people go, oh my God. Why didn't I think of that?
Well, hopefully this will give rise to a whole new set of innovators, and then Zayna will have to deal with them and get their innovations to market.
Right.
Unfortunately, we are all out of
Great.
time for our conversation right now, but I wanted to say thank you to you both for joining us and for sharing your diverse perspectives from both ends of the healthcare market. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So before we close out, I do want to say, so the main stage will be, for those of you watching live still, the main stage will be back in action in just about an hour. In the meantime, we hope that you are checking on our Twitter feed. It is #xMed, the letter X, M-E-D. And if you'd like, you want us to pay special attention to what you're tweeting, make sure you use our handle. You can use either @exponentialmedicine or @_Guidewell. We look forward to seeing you guys again at the next break. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Guidewell Insights Lounge. I'm Jessica DeMassa signing off.